regardless of what your personality is, the goal should never be for you to shine.
No. If you hear facilitator, it's often like, oh, you would be such a good facilitator because you're so extroverted and you're so outgoing and you're this and you're that. But that's not always helpful.
Right.
Because the best ones are the ones that sit back and the ones that listen and the ones that are actively hearing what people are saying or not saying. And that can be sometimes really hard to do for someone who's a bigger personality and used to taking up space, which isn't a bad thing. But you really have to check yourself if you're in that kind of space or you've been told you're in that space, which here.
Welcome back to Momentum. We've been talking a lot about facilitation and facilitative leadership, but I felt like we never really took an opportunity to dive a bit deeper into what facilitation is and what it means to be a good facilitator. What I've learned over time is that the best facilitators make it look really easy to create a great experience, help groups do their best thinking, and somehow make it look effortless. Whereas being a facilitator myself, I know the intention and the amount of work that goes into preparation and the skill behind it. And for that reason, I'm really honored to be welcoming Britt Grundy here today with us in the studio. Britt is one of our Sidekick consultants and one of the best facilitators that I've had the pleasure of working with throughout my career. And she has helped many leadership teams, project teams, and organizations navigate everything from process mapping to team building to solving complex business challenges. And together, we will be pulling back a little bit of that curtain behind facilitation. What goes into impactful facilitation? What does it mean to be a facilitator? Is it an art or a science? And hopefully kind of we'll be able to drill it down to like the more tangible thing, like how can our listeners be better facilitators in their day-to-day life? So welcome, Britt.
Thanks.
Welcome to Momentum.
Finally made it.
You finally made it. Your debut. And maybe a good point to start is when I can imagine your friends or family or whatever, whenever you share what you do in your daily life, they might be facilitation. What? So if someone asks you what you do as a facilitator, how do you answer?
Yeah, it's a good question. And normally when people think of facilitation, it's like, oh, you're just talking to people, like you're having a conversation. But it's way, way more than that because you're really doing the opposite. You're really leading people to get to some sort of conclusion, some sort of outcome. It's a lot of collaboration. It's a lot of talking through issues and facilitating. How many times are you going to hear that? Facilitating a space where people feel comfortable and confident in the direction that they're going and in the things that they're saying. To use a sports analogy, because I love sports and FIFA's on and all that stuff, I would equate facilitation to a soccer ref or a football ref for you.
Football, yes, thank you.
And the reason being, they're not the ones scoring the goals. They're not the ones leading the charge. The best referees are the ones that you never hear about.
Right.
They're the ones that was a great game.
They're not being yelled at.
They're not being yelled at. Hopefully I'm not yelled at as a facilitator. But the point is they're not doing anything in the game per se. They're just making sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate. And that's really, to me, what facilitators do. So it's not having a conversation. It's not leading a lecture. It's not doing anything like that. It's really about directing or getting people to get to the outcome that they are looking to achieve.
Yeah. So that outcome piece, and you mentioned it at the start too, is kind of you start with that end in mind almost, right? Like what do you want to get out of a session? And then, and I'm paraphrasing here, but then basically setting the foundational rules or like the rules of the game, laying out how we're going to play today. And then basically kind of let the group maybe do most of the
Exactly.
work and talking.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Hopefully the soccer players know how to play soccer.
You would think so.
You would think, but we've seen some things that are questionable. So it's up to the ref to guide that experience and make sure that it's a level playing field for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What when you like I love the analogy with sports, obviously. If you bring it to the business world, like how does a facilitated session differ from a meeting?
Well, meetings can be facilitated. I will say, I think the best meetings are the ones that are facilitated.
Right.
We've often heard the like, oh, that could have been an email.
Yeah.
And that has some merit to it, because if you're not prepared to facilitate the meeting, if you're not prepared to lead people through a discussion, if you're not prepared by way of an agenda so that everyone understands what the outcome is, then you're doing yourself a disservice there. So I do think most of the time, all meetings should be facilitated to some capacity. The level and depth differs, but
Yep.
that's what I believe anyway.
Yeah. So what you're saying, like if a meeting is not worth being facilitated, then it may have could have been just an email.
Or just question, like, why do I need these people in this room? And what is the outcome that I'm looking to get out of this conversation or this discussion? Who haven't I heard from before that I want to hear from? It's all about the thinking and the planning that goes into that. And being intentional is what makes a good meeting good. And again, just bringing it back to that conversation of, you'd never hear of like, oh, you facilitated that meeting so well. I don't really want to hear that as the facilitator. I want to hear, wow, we had such a great discussion. I felt like everyone was heard. That was such a good point that Susie made, who doesn't really talk that much. And we all have clear direction. We all have a thing to move forward with. So I think that's why meetings should be facilitated.
Yeah. And so again, reiterating that like outcome focused, but I think participation is also something you just mentioned, like Susie, who never says anything in a meeting. When she has contributed, I think that's a win, right? Like you want to have everyone in the group participate and contribute, at least kind of to the extent that they want to and are able to. And you mentioned something earlier about talking versus listening. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like what makes a good facilitator when it comes to that?
Yeah. The best facilitators talk the least, I would say. There's a stat out there that 80% of your time as a facilitator should be listening. Wow. So if you feel like if you're talking too much, if you're saying too much, if you're involved, you're not supposed to be the expert in the room. You're supposed to get everyone else to feel, again, confident in having that discussion, saying their opinion and getting to that end goal. So I think a facilitator should be as silent as possible. And people, if you hear facilitator, it's often like, oh, you would be such a good facilitator because you're so extroverted and you're so outgoing and you're this and you're that. But that's not always helpful, right? Because the best ones are the ones that sit back and the ones that listen and the ones that are actively hearing what people are saying or not saying. And that can be sometimes really hard to do for someone who's a bigger personality and used to taking up space, which isn't a bad thing. But you really have to check yourself if you're in that kind of space, or you've been told you're in that space, which so that might be a bit of a misconception around facilitation, that becomes the biggest person in the room. Whereas, sure, if you're doing a keynote or something, that might be true, like from a public speaking point of view. But facilitation, you're saying, is much more about listening, and therefore can be done by various different personas, and might actually be counter to this kind of very extroverted, energetic, middle of the room type of persona. They may have to like check themselves. Yeah, exactly. And the point that you made about the energy in the room, like sometimes you do have to be the one that's the most outgoing. You have to be a level up against everyone else in the room. But you really have to, again, the listening isn't just using your ears, it's using your vision to see, are people willing to talk? Are they not willing to talk? Are they kind of apprehensive? Are they not? What level should I be bringing to this as the facilitator to ensure that the type of discussion we're having matches the tone and energy of the room?
Right. So it is reading the room and matching that energy, seeing what the room needs, again, at the service of the outcome that you're trying to accomplish together. So I think the main thing, regardless of what your personality is, the goal should never be for you to shine.
No.
Have you ever seen a ref shine on the field? Well, some try to. Maybe some try to.
Yeah, no.
But in hearing you, I can also imagine people are listening and think like, ooh, that sounds pretty hard to do. Like, is it, how would you, and this is a bit of a like cheesy question, but is it an art or science? Like what, can anybody do this or learn this? What's your perspective on that?
To answer the first part, I think it is both an art and a science. The art comes in because you have to put your own flair on things.
Right.
I think if you just went by the book and here's the workshop you should do, here's how to do it, here's how to execute it, and you just followed that like a recipe book, I don't think it would be as effective if you were bringing your own energy, if you were bringing your own personality, your own way of coming to the table and helping people along. But in saying that, it is also a science because you really, really, really have to prepare. Scientists, they do a hypothesis. They do their whole, I'm not a scientist, so apologies.
You're a researcher, though.
Apologies to any scientists listening. But you've got your hypothesis, you've got what you're going to do, you've got the materials that you'll need. You're really, really, really prepped. And then when you do the actual experiment, that's the very end.
Right.
You've done so much to prepare. And it's the exact same way with facilitation. To bring up the 80% rule again, 80% of your time should be in planning.
Right.
And if it's not, the room might go sideways. Something might happen and you're not prepared to pivot or act accordingly. So I think that's where that science comes in. So it is really an art and a science.
So science mostly in the preparation and thinking through the structure. What is that outcome that you're trying to accomplish with the team? But the art piece in what you bring as a person into the room. And I can also see like the leveling energy and reading the room. Yeah, there might be a playbook for that, but not really. Right?
Yeah. If the vibes are off, you got to sense that the vibes are off. I don't know.
Yeah. So I always, yeah. And maybe there is like, I can imagine like practice will teach you some of that and will be really helpful. But in part, you also kind of have to have that like sense for it. Right.
Yeah. And the thing that I will say as well is that people often get like really nervous and scared of, oh, it's not going to go how I want it to go, or I messed up this part, or I didn't explain this effectively. It's like if you're a dancer on a stage and you mess up one tiny little part and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that when you get off the stage. But then everyone who watched it was like, oh, that was so good.
Right.
Like you crushed that. Here's your flowers. Here you go. They didn't notice your small mistake. So it's really just about moving past that mistake and understanding that you're going to mess up. It's just part of facilitation. Oh, I should have asked that question differently. I should have asked that person to speak up. The worksheet doesn't really match what we were talking about. Like there could be any number of things, but people don't notice as long as you've planned.
Right. So planning is key. 80% of the success of a session depends on the preparation. Sometimes, and I just had that earlier this morning, like I was facilitating a session of only an hour, but like I think 2 to 3 hours of prep went into that, right? Like, and even maybe even more so because it was just an hour. Time is so tight, and this is my biggest pitfall. I always plan for way too many activities and have way too many great ideas to do in the room, but time's often a bit of a constraint, right? Like, and you can never fully predict what's going to happen in the room. But because I was prepped, I was able to shift like activities, and I scratched one or I merged two just to kind of make sure that we still reached the outcome. But with fewer activities or not exactly the way I had planned them. But that's sad. I'm curious for your thoughts on that. Like, it does feel like a bit of a tension, right? Like you put so much time and effort into a plan to then throw it out the window as soon as the session starts. Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it is, because you're like, hey, I'm so prepped. I'm ready to go. I am so confident that this is going to go well. And it will. It will go well, but it's not ever going to go well in the way that you think it's going to.
Right.
So you really have to be married to the outcome and the goal that you're trying to achieve in that meeting, and not the agenda or the timing of the things, or we didn't get through that we didn't get through that activity. or whatever the case may be, you really have to be married to the outcome. What's the goal that you're trying to achieve in the meeting? And if it goes a little bit tangential, if it goes a little bit sideways, if people are late and you got to condense things, what's the path of least resistance for me to facilitate a session to get to that end goal? And that's really where that planning comes in.
Great. Yeah, so I think that's another myth debunked here. Like facilitation is not just time management, right? Like it's not having an agenda and sticking to it and making sure that we only spend 10 minutes on this one item.
Yeah. No, like we were facilitating a session, last week?
Yeah.
And again, fully prepped. Deck was beautiful, if I do say so myself. Activities
It was
planned. So fun, so engaging. And it was about design thinking, and I made the wrongful assumption that they had a baseline understanding of what design thinking was. So I said, like, by show of hands, who's heard of design thinking? And not
hands.
not a single hand raised.
Yeah.
I got a little bit flustered. I'm sure you saw that. I was like,
yeah.
Okay. So we had to take a step back and explain every single step in design thinking so that when we got to the actual activities and then practicing what they've heard, they really understand that through line of start to finish of what we're actually talking about. So again, we planned, we did all of those things, but there's that pivot of, okay, we'll reduce this activity or we'll eliminate that one because it was so important for them to understand in order for them to execute. And the goal of that meeting was to get them an understanding of design thinking and how they're going to use it in practice.
Right.
So if they don't have that first part, how are they going to use it in practice?
Yeah. So you kind of had to take a couple of steps back. What would you say was in your preparation that allowed for pivoting that in the moment? And then I'll add, I do this a lot, poor facilitation, asking two questions at the same time. So what was in your prep that allowed the pivot, but also in hindsight, would you have done anything differently in the prep or in the session itself?
Yeah. So the session was 2 hours, 2.5, 3
hours, I think. Yeah.
And I think we only prepped for 2.
Right.
Because we started at quarter after.
Yeah.
We did blah, blah, blah. Which always happens in and of itself, but it's good to leave space because there was some really valuable discussion that they ended up having about their day-to-day and connecting the dots that admittedly flew right over my head. Again, I'm not the expert in the room. You guys sounds like you're having a great conversation. So it's leaving space for that natural facilitation to happen. Yeah. That natural discussion to happen. Is I think the first one.
So don't fully plan like the 3 hours. If you have a session of 3 hours, plan for like at least 20% less or whatever the rule is there. But
and if you're ahead, who hates an extra break?
An extra break.
Who hates ending early?
Yeah.
Like, we achieved everything we wanted to. Like,
yeah, that's a good one.
Fantastic.
Whereas it's way more frustrating to be able to, or to have to rush it all the way at the end and not really feel satisfied about where you're leaving things.
Exactly. Like we didn't really get to the goal. We kind of did. What could we have done differently? Then it becomes a conversation like that where you feel a bit as the facilitator uneasy coming out of that.
Yeah.
Versus confident that the people, whatever you're doing, understood the topic, had a great discussion, and are going to use whatever tool or method in this scenario that we've practiced with them.
Yeah. And was there anything in your prep that you would have done differently in hindsight?
Yes. I would have sought to understand what the understanding was of that,
right,
of the session a little bit more. Who are the people in the room? How much do they really understand? If we had more time, it was quite a quick turnaround. Maybe like a baseline survey would have been really helpful of the participants.
Yeah.
Just to get a sense of who knows, who doesn't. It might have helped with our group setup as well. Yeah. If people had raised their hand, putting them strategically in groups would have been a lot more beneficial. But you got to pivot. And I think it went well.
I would agree. And I think at large that was due to the great preparation of it all. And then obviously kind of the ability and the skills, or kind of the sensing the room, reading the room, and acting on it as we went. What are generally kind of those things what are you looking for in a room? When we say like read the room, it's great, but how does that work?
Just read the room.
Just do it.
No, it's you're looking for who is participating and who is not. That's
Okay.
a big one. You're looking for, is the leader dictating the discussion and kind of co-facilitating with you in an odd way, where they're trying to lead the group to the end because they're frustrated, and the whole point was to get the group
Right.
aligned. So those are two things that I would say 100% you have to look for. Anything you would add?
I mean, there is the typical things around engagement, right? Like people being on their laptops or on phones, or and I think one of the things I love doing there is starting at the start with some ground rules around engagement and participation. And like we also always acknowledge that things can come up, right? Like life happens, but then ask people to step out of the room if anything really pops up. And another one is just to kind of right at the start of a session do something that's really engaging, like either fun or an activity that kind of gets that energy up in the room, or even like literally a mindset activity. One that I really love is around kind of what is one mindset that you're bringing inside the room today? Like how are you going to help us accomplish the objective? And what's one that you've carried into the room, but you're going to kind of park outside for now? And I found that just making that explicit really helps people to be more present in the moment. So just some small kind of
that's a good
tangible
one.
things. But
the paper airplane activity is always a really fun one.
Yeah.
And you can go so many different ways with it, which I really like. It's applicable to almost anything.
It is, yeah.
Where you have the architect, and their job is to write all the steps to make an paper airplane, and you have the builder, and their job is to build the airplane. And the first round is all about no talking, no gestures. We're not doing charades. Architect writes, builder builds. Based on exactly what's written, they all go outside, throw the paper airplane. Some of them absolutely bomb.
Right.
And you go back in and you have now you're allowed to have a discussion with your partner. How can we pivot? What can we do differently? What did you mean by what you said here? And then that person, the builder, recreates the airplane, and you go outside and do it again. That's always a really fun one because it gets people up and moving, which people often don't think about when they're doing a workshop, is the different learning styles and how people really like to physically do things.
Yeah.
Physically get up. How much energy that adds, especially in a morning session when people have had their first coffee of the day.
Yeah.
So I really like that one too.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think we've used it for like to stress differences in personalities. Like some people like a very detailed description. Some prefer visuals. Some really don't get there without talking to each other, right? The one that I loved in a session that we did last week was one person just wrote down, "I trust your expertise. Build the best plane you can." And we've done it for that purpose as well, right? Like creative thinking, or like thinking in different ways. Communications is part of it. Design thinking. So
making assumptions.
Yeah,
there's so many ways you can take that one, and I really like that one.
And I think the great thing, and you mentioned kind of the adult learning or how people learn. And at Sidekick, we use this tell, show, do, review method quite a bit. But in the do, and basically across that structure, we always try to kind of combine like left brain, right brain, physical activity with like more thinking, individual with more group, trying to balance that out. But I find especially kind of those type of activities where it is physical movement and also completely outside of the context of your normal work, just puts everyone at an equal playing field, and very rapidly kind of surfaces the true issues, or like the objective often of the session that you're trying to get at, right?
Yeah, it's a good
What
one.
are some other techniques or tools that you found like consistently work well when you're facilitating?
The one I always say, it's kind of annoying that I say it all the time, is wait 10 seconds after you ask a question as the facilitator. And the reason being, it gives secondary processors time to think, and especially people in the room, there's always going to be someone, you ask a question.
Yeah.
No,
or no even hand, not even hand raising, right?
Yeah, they just start talking. People really don't like silence, and that goes for you as the facilitator as well. So it's helpful if you grab like a glass of water and take a sip of water, and in your head you count to 10. So it gives you kind of a crutch, and then people get so uncomfortable that someone will answer the question. And if they haven't after those 10 seconds, it's on you as the facilitator because you didn't ask the right question. Either it was too soon for you to ask a really in-depth question.
Right.
It wasn't clear. You asked multiple questions in one statement. There's a number of things that could have made someone unable to answer the question. So I really believe in that 10-second pause and giving people time to think and for you to reflect on if you've asked the right question or not. So that's one that I really believe in.
I love that. And there's a lot into it. And you said it before. I noticed it kind of. I feel like in how you talk about facilitation, you take a lot of like pride in it, but ownership and accountability. And there's always this kind of learning loop. Like you're always reflecting on how you could have done things better, how you could have gotten more out of the group, whether that's in like the micro moments or after you've done a session heading into the next session. Yeah,
exactly. And like bringing back the sports analogy, like you're going to finish a game and you're not going to be like, I crushed that. Maybe Messi in the group.
Well, he might have thought that
in the group stage game with the 3 goals, but there's always like, oh, why did I do that way? Or how could I have done this differently?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would ever, if you're a great facilitator, you would never say you're a great facilitator.
Right.
Or an expert facilitator. You could do all the training in the world. And I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice as the person leading the group or facilitating the group about that.
Yeah. And I think that also goes back to the art versus science, right? Like there's not one right way to do it. Like every room, every session, every group of people is different and requires something different.
Yeah.
So will you ever be fully kind of mastering the skill?
No, and that's like in this age of AI now where it's so much easier for you to generate a workshop.
Right. Yeah.
Write me a workshop, blah, 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 whatever your prompt is. And it will spit something out that sounds on paper fantastic, but it might not actually match what you do as the facilitator and how you operate and facilitate. And it might not match the group dynamics at all. You're having a really serious discussion about your people plan for the next year.
Something
and
unexpected
they're like,
came up.
do the paper airplane activity.
Let's have some fun.
And it's like, that doesn't match.
Right.
So if you go again based off of like what is being given to you and you don't put your own personal twist on things, that's where it becomes so important and where that practice comes in. By all means, if you want to generate a workshop. Yeah. But you really have to go through and understand what value am I bringing and why am I in this workshop or in this session?
Yeah.
And how can I implement that in the actual session itself? So it all goes back to planning.
All goes back to planning. Do you feel like everyone could, in theory, learn it or do it? Like,
yeah, 100%. There's no doubt in my mind that someone is unable to facilitate. And the reason I say that is because we're all people. We all understand each other to a degree. There's some nuance on, again, reading the room, how to do that effectively. But it all comes down to practice.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's ever a scenario where someone is unable to do that if they're prepared.
Right. Yeah. So it's there might be a difference in kind of how naturally it comes, I can imagine.
Of course. Or how nervous you are. Or,
yeah. Like there might be some of that. But again, practice might take a lot of that away and preparation. So that's preparation. But if there are...
I will, sorry to cut you off, Bonnie. I will also say reflection
Right.
is that third piece, is the planning, the practice, and the reflection at the end. Because if you're not reflecting on the things you could have done better or did do well, which is also just as important, you're not going to improve.
Right.
So it's always good to have a debrief, whether it's with the leader that put you in or asked you to do the session, or with your co-facilitator, your peer, someone in the room to bounce ideas off of what we could have done differently. I think that's the third piece that's really important.
The reflection piece.
Yeah.
If there are listeners out there and they're like, interesting, facilitation, wanna do more of that, wanna practice that, what advice would you give them? Like where to start?
You can start literally anytime, any place, with anyone. You don't have to facilitate in a workshop. You don't have to facilitate in a business session. You're facilitating with your friends all the time. You're facilitating with your kids, with your parents, with your in-laws. It doesn't have to be in a session.
Right.
But it's all about going into whatever that conversation is that you want to have, whether it's difficult or you're looking to get a decision, going in with a plan. I'm sure we've all had this experience when your friends want to go on a trip and it's so exciting and you put the group trip together, the message group has been made, and you go, hey, I'm thinking about planning a trip. Where do you guys want to go? And you'll either get 20 ideas
or none,
or I'm okay with whatever, which is not true.
Right.
It's not true at all. So asking better questions is a great place to start. I shouldn't have asked, where do we want to go? That's the worst question I could have asked. I might want to ask, what's everyone's budget? What's your availability? How many days do you want to go? Do you want a beach vibe? Do you want a city? Do you want to be in nature? And that will get you to that end goal so much quicker than either the 20 things or I'm good with whatever, and then it becomes an issue later.
Yeah.
Not to say that the group will actually go on the trip, but
but you had an objective, you better reach it.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the whole thing. Never gets out of the group chat. But at least if you have a plan going in, that's a great way to start with facilitation.
So it is reflecting on those questions that you ask. And I was actually thinking about that as you were mentioning the 10 seconds kind of waiting after a question, because that's one that I practice a lot, like in parenting. The most annoying thing is like asking my 3-year-old son a question and he just doesn't answer, or like he just seems to completely ignore me, or I ask him to do something and like nothing happens. Often when I just wait the 10 seconds, he will do it, like without getting angry or chasing him or kind of just pushing more, right? Because that will only work counterintuitive or counter effectively. But the 10 seconds, it always, 9 out of 10 times gets me where I want to be, right?
Yeah, 10
it's
seconds.
Just kind of
parenting, so easy.
Time. Parenting.
Parenting,
running business meetings, planning friend trips, all the same thing.
Yeah.
But we're saying in a way it is, and it is, I think we may not have even called that out specifically, but asking the right questions.
Yeah.
Right.
And being comfortable in asking the wrong question.
Yes. That's
and
actually a very good point.
That.
Asking questions might be the lesson here, right? Instead of teaching or just kind of telling people things, asking questions might be the simplest start of facilitation.
Yeah. And again, anywhere, anytime, any place, you name it.
Cool. Is there anything that you feel like we've missed in talking about facilitation?
There's a few things that I would say from a like psychological safety perspective as well that we didn't really talk about, because people get sometimes really uncomfortable, especially if you're facilitating a conversation that's really awkward,
right,
or difficult, or it's an outcome that you're not comfortable with. People will get into that fight or flight mode. And in turn, that makes them on the defense. So if you're saying things, if someone's answering a question that you have and you're like, yes, exactly, good job, it makes everyone else in the room feel like there was a right answer. So then they're being quizzed instead of being listened to.
Yes.
So there's that reframing there of not only asking the right questions, but answering it appropriately as the facilitator. You might want to say, instead of yes, great job, that's an interesting point. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah.
Or if you wanted to say, let's open that up to the room. Does anyone have a comment on what was just said? It really invites people to have a conversation instead of saying, yep, that was right, and now no one else wants to talk. So I will say that. And then the other thing about questions and answers, if we want to get into that, is there's like a 3-step formula for a facilitator. When you've asked a question and someone's responded to you, you acknowledge them by saying what I just said. That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
And then you would drive it. So acknowledge, drive. I understand how that would be really frustrating. Does anyone else have anything that they want to share about this topic? So you acknowledge what they've said, so they know that you're listening, which is just as important from a psychological safety perspective. You drive the conversation, and you ask a question to follow up. Sometimes you'll ask a question and it's totally not what you were looking for.
Right.
And it has the opportunity to go on a tangent. And that's a great way to reframe what someone has said. That's a really interesting point. I understand what you're doing or what you're saying. Does anyone else have any other ideas?
Right. And then you can kind of reroute the conversation.
Exactly. So when you're thinking about, again, having the end in mind and that goal, and someone says something that is going to distract from that goal, it's a great way to reroute the conversation without it ever feeling that way, or that they feel like they got the wrong answer.
Yeah. That's very interesting. That's very interesting, Britt. And I can see how that can be very helpful in facilitating a session.
Thank you. Why don't you ask me a question?
Is there anything else that you would want to share about facilitation? Practicing points. No, I truly think there were a lot of good nuggets in that. And here I did kind of acknowledging, but also having judgment, positive judgment. But that is one of the things that I've learned and I'm still practicing with. Like it feels so natural to kind of give that positive affirmation or like recognition of a point, say a good point, but realizing what the effect of that is on the rest of the group. It's with all the positive intent, but it might have the complete opposite effect to what you were thinking. So kind of that neutral, non-judgmental response in just kind of acknowledging, driving, or summarizing, and then kind of reframing or opening it back up, I think is a really, really great technique to to practice.
You're the referee. You should be neutral.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're not neutral, there's a problem, and you're going to hear about it. Whether you hear about it directly after the session, you reflect on it independently, or someone in the room says something to you.
Yeah.
So, but it's all about practice. Asking questions.
Yes.
Go with
questions
the flow.
are very important. Non-judgmental questions. That's my biggest learning. But yeah, I think overall, what we've been saying and just kind of trying to summarize the 3 points that we said earlier, right? Like 80% of the success of your session goes into preparation. Setting yourself up for success, thinking about like what's the objective that you want to walk out with, or the outcome that you want to walk out the room with at the end of the day. Then in the room, it's kind of not being married to the plan and being able to navigate, read the room, and do what is necessary to get you to that outcome. And then the third one was reflection. Reflection in the moment, in micro moments, reframing your question. Like there are no wrong questions. There might be kind of better ways to ask the question next time or to reframe it. And after each session or like facilitation, you can never really fully master the skill, in that you will always have something to learn and to kind of do differently in a next setting with a new group of people, with a new outcome or objective in mind. So I think that is an interesting question to leave the audience with, or a challenge to leave the audience with too, is for any next meeting or engagement that you find yourself into, or that you're kind of walking yourself into, I would just start with asking yourself, like, what is the objective or what's the desired outcome? Think through how you can get there, and then see how that changes how you facilitate that engagement. So if you're listening, want to leave you with that question. And it also brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you, Britt, for sharing all your wisdom and your skills and expertise,
anytime.
The art and the science of facilitation. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation and want to continue it, follow our channels, subscribe to our newsletter, or comment on this episode. And would love to hear how your next facilitated engagement is going. See you next time.